¿Qué pasa, raza? Today we have a great episode for you today. We're at the Latinx Collaborative. The Latinx Collaborative is partnering up with the Latino Arts Foundation to bring you the Fuerza Leadership Conference. So you're gonna get to hear how we're using LowRiding to present leadership. So stay tuned because we have an amazing episode for you today. All right, hey everyone. My name is Eric Arazo. I'm the Executive Director of Student and Community Engagement. And I also oversee the LowRider Bike Club, the Olathe Leadership LowRider Bike Club. And so I'll be talking to you guys a little bit about that. But today I'm really gonna be focusing on leadership related to LowRiding and how the two kind of correlate in what the work that I've been doing in the last few years. So, I'm known as the LowRider teacher, which actually puts a lot of pressure on me sometimes because people expect me to be a pro at hydraulics and paint and everything, and that's not the case. I'm just a teacher that happens to lowride, so I got the title LowRider teacher. So whenever I get questions, I usually have to be like, I don't know, and they look at me kind of funny, but it's all right, I'll take it. So my background, I'm originally from the Mission District of California. If you guys are not familiar, when I started talking to kids, I realized that I really enjoyed talking to kids and I wanted to pursue that as a career. So I went back and I talked to a counselor and I said, what do I got to do to be a teacher? I thought maybe 2 months of school, I'll be good to go. Of course, I found out after a bachelor's and a master's degree to get to that position. But I've pretty much done everything from teaching to being a paraprofessional to working with the custodians to anything you can imagine as I've grown in my career that led me now to being in leadership. But through that process, what I did was really dive into what I think the gangs were doing that we weren't doing in education, which was relationship building. If you look at the gang structure, it's pretty amazing. They reach our kids at elementary age by introducing the concept. By middle school, more responsibility. By the time a kid is in high school, they feel that they're in too deep to quit, and this has kind of become their identity. And traditionally, this is when a school counselor will say, hey, you need to stop doing what you're doing. It's not good for you. And then on top of that, not necessarily even giving you what to do, just don't do that, which is very hard to do. And then really pumping them up. When you get to middle school, we'll have a club ready for you that's gonna lead you to that next level, and then waiting for them when they got to middle school, and then by the time they get to high school, they're in too deep to quit. And so we started with about 12 kids at the high school level, and then we ended up with about 500 kids at the district level. And that program was fantastic, it was incredible. But I started realizing that the kids that I had created the program for were starting to slip between the cracks again because Hispanic Leadership Club became more of an academic program as time went on, where kids were going through the program and then telling their siblings, hey, come into this program so that you can go to college, right? We became very college focused, which led me to look at data again, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So it's kind of a precursor to what I'll be talking about in a second, but that's who I am. And I've done a ton of research and I've talked to a bunch of folks to really kind of try to say what a lowrider is, because I think if you talk to somebody in the automotive industry, they would tell you a lowrider is a car that has hydraulics, has a crazy paint job, a custom interior, and that's all it is. But I think if you talk to us that are lowriders, you're gonna find that it's a culture, it's a person, it's a way of life, it's a way we behave, the way we kind of do our day-to-day. Lowriding essentially was created because a lot of the kiddos were seeing hot rods in the area that they knew that they couldn't build. And a hot rod was high and fast. At the time, they were building a gasser style car that was very much so lifted off the ground, and it was extremely fast, and there was a lot of money into that. The kids in the barrio knew they weren't gonna be able to do that because they didn't have the funding to do that, so they took whatever cars they could get from junkyards or hand-me-down cars, and they did the opposite, low and slow. And somewhere in between all that, we started realizing that we can add more batteries and more pumps, and next thing you know, we're jumping and we're trying to see if we can get as high as a soda can, and then as high as a beer can. And then I would say in the 90s, when I was really into low riding, we were doing stuff that we probably shouldn't be doing with cars. We were getting all four wheels off the ground and all kinds of fun stuff. My very first lowrider was a mini truck with a bed dance kit, and it was a really cool time to be in lowriding. But again, inside of that car or inside of what surrounds that car, there's a culture around it, an identity piece. And most of us, when we have our vehicle, we identify with that vehicle as an extension of us. When they see that car, they know it's one of us. And in the very first slide, my car was on it. And when people see that red Cadillac, they know it's Eric's car. So I have friends from Española, New Mexico that swear that it came from Española. Obviously, where I'm from, everybody says it came from San Jose. And then everybody argues that it really came from East LA. I think after doing a ton of data and a ton of research, unfortunately, I can't say that it came from San Jose. It looks like LA is the winner, just because of the realities of what was happening in the time, access to vehicles. We were actually very much so a farming community. At the time, Española, was very similar. That there wasn't a lot of funding there. LA had a lot of the resources, so it looks like LA might have been the birthplace. But again, I'll leave that up in space because I don't want to get a bunch of emails later on that I'm wrong. So, hardest part. And how I think we can tie it into leadership, because I think it takes a lot of leadership. I'm looking at Deanna right now. She's been doing this leadership for years before I got here. Several other folks that have been trying to lead us away from these negative stereotypes that have been created about what lowriding is. And I think a big part of that was the introduction of lowriding to the majority of America, to mainstream America, was brought to us by music videos or movies that portrayed somebody with a lowrider as being a criminal, which is quite interesting because yes, there's somewhat a reality to that, right? Every stereotype seems to have some true origin to it, and then you have to dive in a little bit deeper. But for the most part, if you are in a car club, especially in California, you were encouraged not to do anything criminal, because then your car club would be tagged as a gang, and then you wouldn't be able to cruise the streets without getting pulled over and tagged as a gang. So for most of us, lowriding was a gang prevention tool instead of a gang tool. And I will tell you, the folks that might have been in that lifestyle and had lowriders, they were not at the level that a car in a car club would have been in. So it might have been a primered Buick Regal with some wire wheels versus something with a candy paint job and hydraulics and things like that. And to be able to look at it and say this is gang, related, that's crazy, and obviously goes with what are you using it for, right? If you see a bandana, right, the bandana itself is not a gang member. If you're using it to tie your hair, to go to a play or whatever, right, versus trying to use it on the street to do something negative. And obviously, we're not using it in that way, so it's not a gang thing.
I believe on the seventh day God created a lowrider.
Lowriding is life for me. Like I said, it's a tradition that'll never die. We turn heads, that's for sure. When it's somebody who hasn't seen a lowrider before in their life, just like we did the first time we saw a lowrider. Once I saw that, I was like, that's all me.
My first time I ever seen one was when I was 13 years old. He was hitting switches and I just completely lost him. Blew my mind, it completely blew my mind.
I've always liked the artistry behind it. They were like metal canvases, just rolling down the road.
That's my first memory, man. It's just being at awe at, a car moving up and down.
And I told my buddies, sooner or later, guys, I'm gonna get a lowrider. Mark my words, I'm gonna get a lowrider soon. People didn't believe me.
Back in the 90s, there was only one place in Kansas City where you could get Lowrider magazine. It was like our Bible, just how to build these cars and what we needed to make it happen.
Yeah, I've been doing this since I was a kid and getting a model and just taking it to the next level. Now that I'm older, I go back and I look and it's like now I have that full-size car that I built numerous times as a kid,
I always had the magazines and be drawing, thinking about painting, and teacher would use me as an example of what not to be like when you get older, but
A lot of times I didn't feel Hispanic enough, and I didn't feel American enough. But when lowriding came into my life, it was like, this is who I am.
We're still on the streets, but we're on the streets a different way, It's got nothing to do with no gangs or nothing like that. It's just culture. It's a lowrider culture is all it is for us.
Everybody struggles through life, and sometimes we need an exit from reality, and I think the cars give us that.
To me, the car scene was a blessing, and it got me out of all the trouble and entertained myself with working on vehicles instead of doing something stupid.
I saw kids that looked like me struggling with their Chicano identity because they were in the middle of Kansas. I saw that they were starting to mimic the gang mentality. So, what I decided to do was create a lowrider bike and say, hey, do you guys like the bike? Come build the bike. To have their identity as Chicanos and being able to say, this is mine in a positive environment with adults and mentors that supported, they found themselves. This is our culture and it's supported by this community, then this is home, man. I'm where I belong and now I can thrive.
Keep the family united is all we want. That's all I want our kids to keep doing. Keep that strong, tight family.
That's what all this is about, is just bringing everybody together and having a peaceful atmosphere that you can enjoy.
This has been a life change for me since then. Since I bought my Cadillac, everything changed.
I cherish every little second of it because I'm with my family.
When you're in the car and it's hitting switches, it's life-changing.
You just can't describe it. I mean, you just gotta experience it to really understand what it's like and why we like it so much.
The tattoos, the artistry, the passion, it's all there. That's why I say at the end of the day, we're all one color. We're all involved in this. We're all accepted and we're all respected and we're all loyal to each other. And the world that is out there that doesn't understand it or doesn't accept it, well, then you guys are the ones that are different, not us.
I know everybody has a story, but it's not always the one you think,
The gentleman that put this video together had reached out and he said, do you know any lowrider people? And I started presenting him to just one person that led to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. He took probably 6 months to put this thing together. And he went all around Kansas City, and I was nervous because I didn't know what this was going to turn out to be like. He did an amazing job really representing the lowrider community here in Kansas City by showing some of the key players like Aaron, Deanna's husband, who's been in the game forever, and others that were in the video that have been doing this for a long time, but really showing what we're about, that we're not in that negative stereotype. And I think when, we've shown this gene, in Albuquerque to cities, National City, California, Arizona, people from Texas, all over Albuquerque, and they come out. But number one, they're surprised that we have paved streets because they think we have a bunch of gravel roads in Kansas. But once they get past that, they really love the fact that we're able to have this kind of family atmosphere here in Kansas City. After the leadership program that I told you, Hispanic Leadership Club that I had created, and I started seeing that there was a little bit of a gap there with the kids that I really wanted to bring into the programming, I started looking at data. And when you talk about working with kids that quote unquote are at risk not to graduate, you can really look at sports and see a great example there of an extracurricular, mentoring, and a competitive aspect. They do great. A lot of our kiddos are not getting into sports, whether it's because they don't have the grades to get into it, maybe it's not their thing, and then so how do you replicate that same idea with something different? So what I decided to do was go into my background, and I've been into lowriding my whole entire life, and I used to go to school in a lowrider bike. I had a CD player under the seat, a couple of speakers on my handlebars, and I thought I was the coolest cat in town. And so I thought, man, I'm gonna build a lowrider bike and see if kids like it. And if they do, we'll go with it. So I got a small grant from our Olathe Public Schools Foundation. I built a lowrider bike, a very basic lowrider bike, and was almost out of the box, but we didn't have a big budget. And I had it at Olathe North High School, and I just sat on it. And when passing period came around, all the kids started coming by, and they were like, hey, I like the bike. You know, can I have it? I'd be like, nah, but you can build one after school if you want. I bet, where are we gonna meet, right? And so kids started coming because of the bike after school to build bikes, which was actually kind of a crunch for me because I didn't realize it was going to be that popular. So all of a sudden I had to go find more money because these things aren't cheap. But we were able to get a few more bikes, and kids started coming in to build bikes. And as they were building bikes, we had to have mentors come in and obviously help them with the building of the bike. And then as you know, they were building their bikes, we started going to car shows. I remember one of the first car shows was one that Deanna had, and we all came in riding in, and it was like the coolest thing in the world. And I think at that time our bikes were so basic, but we were so happy to come into a show. And that created an atmosphere where we can be competitive, right? So you added that third component. So you had your extracurricular, you had your mentoring, and now you had that competitive aspect where they're going into these shows and they're saying, I did my bike this way, but that one won. I want to come back and redo my bike so that I can win and place next time. And that created a very successful program. We have a 100% graduation rate in our program since 2016. And we continue to grow the number of kids that are participating in the program. It's become a staple in our community, which is, I think, when you talk about that leadership piece, the groundwork that many others laid before I even got into this. And for those of you that are not from the area, there is a very big difference between certain parts of Kansas and Johnson County, Kansas. And to be able to bring in something like lowriding into Johnson County, the leadership that the kids had, the way that they took this and ran with it, showed our community that it was worth having, to the point that we were able to partner with the police department. When we first started looking for partners, the police department was one that we joined forces with. We now have a lowrider police bike. We have a lowrider sheriff bike. We have one for the fire department. We have one for the drug enforcement agency, which is at their museum in Washington, D.C. We also have, more important than anything, a lowrider bike that we just unveiled at the Johnson County Museum. The bikes are why kids initially come in. It's a great part of our community, but it's really the mentoring program. The kids will fix those bikes up from scratch. They have high school to build it, and then when they graduate high school, they get to keep their bike. When we started, I could tell you that we would take, you know, at the time there were maybe $250 bikes, and we would build them up, and they would end up with a $500 bike at the end. We have very much so progressed to a level that they start off with. The bikes now cost around $450. And by the time the kids are done with their bike, those bikes are worth anywhere from $3,500 to $6,500, depending on how much work they've put into their bikes. We have won national awards. We won Best Graphics on a Lowrider Bike at the Albuquerque Lowrider Super Show. And that's all happening internally. We've been able to grow and learn. Just recently, we had Rob Vanderslice come out and teach a bunch of us mentors how to even take it to a deeper level. And then we're actually getting ready to have a small class like that for our students and teach them what we learned and take our bikes to the next level. We were also able to build a lowrider police car. Aaron Munoz came out and laid down the foundation for that. We had no idea what we were doing at all at that time. We actually bit off way more than we could chew, I'll tell you that. We learned our lesson. But the key concept to all of this is that what we want to show our kids is that they can maintain their culture and identity and still be successful. What we find after 21 years of being in education, I have done this every year to ask kids to describe what success looks like. most often they don't describe their moms, dads, brothers, uncles, or people in their community. Which means that they don't see themselves as being successful. And we want to show our kids that they can be successful and keep their identity. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we tell a kid, hey, you know what, just rock yourself the way you are, go to job interviews the way you are, everything's gonna be all good because they need to take you for what it is? No, we talk about professionalism as well. We talk about how we dress for interviews. We talk about professionalism in Mexico City or in Japan. What does it look like, right? Because there's a misconception at times that professionalism belongs to a certain race, which is not true, right? We are very much so professionals everywhere all around the world, and we want to show our kids that we need to act a certain way in certain spaces, but that we never lose ourselves or turn our back on who we are. That on the weekends, you know, Mr. Arazo has a master's degree, he might wear a suit during the week and he's doing presentations, but on the weekends, I'm hitting 3-wheels on the boulevard, right? Like that's okay too, that we can maintain our identity. And I think once you know that you don't have to fake the funk and you don't have to completely change every bit and piece about yourself to become successful, it becomes an easier pill to swallow because now, okay, cool, I can enter this space as myself and learn something new versus you gotta learn everything new because you can't keep anything about yourself. Anybody essentially that their parents had migrated to California from another country, their kids, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, would identify as I'm a Chicano, right? Even a Peruvian American person, they would come in and they were Chicano, they felt like Chicanos. This is who we are because we identify with each other. We had a place to belong. We were the ni de aquí ni de allá kids, right? We were never too American, American enough, and we weren't, Latino enough, and so we kind of fit in this space. But we had a very comfortable space, and I got to thank all the people that came before me that created a space to where I never felt like I didn't belong. I knew where I belonged. There was this category. I think coming to Kansas City, I did find it odd when I first came here that I didn't see a big Chicano community like everywhere like I had seen it. Now, obviously the numbers aren't the same, but even within the folks that I knew that might have been second or third generation, oftentimes they didn't identify as Chicano. And I also felt like saying the word Chicano was almost a bad word to some people. If I say, oh, you're a Chicana, no, I'm not. I'm either, flat out just an American or I'm Mexican, right? And if they told me they were Mexican, I was like, oh, cool, what part of Mexico were you born in, right? And they're like, well, I wasn't. Like, my grandpa came from Mexico. And I was like, oh, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a nationality, like Dr. Gene Chavez. It was different from me to where I had came from, because I'm looking at you and I'm saying you are a Chicano then, right? But I think even that misconception, right, had taken a little bit south because I'm a Chicano that is in the lowrider community. I'm a guy from California, so on the weekends you're gonna see me wearing Dickies and my flannels and I hit switches. But that doesn't mean that every Chicano identifies as a low-riding Chicano as well, right? There's Chicanos, my friend Stephen Linkes, who's a superintendent in Arlington, Virginia. He is very much so a Chicano, but he doesn't do the lowrider thing, and he doesn't wear Dickies on the weekends, but he's still a Chicano. So I don't know if maybe that was part of the misconception where people felt like because I'm not into lowriders or because I don't like that type of style, therefore I'm not a Chicano, I don't know. But to hopefully answer your question, I do see a huge shift, very much so thanks to you and the efforts that you have been putting out, where I'm now seeing the young people feel that they identify as Chicanos very comfortably, and I'm also not seeing the pushback of 20 years ago. I remember 20 years ago, I had a conversation with a young man, and he was very much so identifying as a Chicano, and he started talking to me about pachucos, and I was telling him the history and Sleepy Hollow y toda la onda. And then his mom came in and she was so mad at me. She wanted to meet with me and she's like, why are you telling my kids about this? I don't want them to talk about that, da 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 da. And it was very much so tied into my kid's gonna be a gang member because he's hearing this stuff. And I was like, no, not at all. We're talking about our beautiful culture and it has nothing to do with gangs. As a matter of fact, part of my lessons that I taught for years and years was this is what our true identity is as a Chicano, and this is the cancer that has tagged itself with us that's not part of us, that we need to get rid of so that we can really express ourselves. But yes, I do see a huge shift thanks to you and others that have been doing the work for years, that I think we're starting to see that that appreciation for what we're doing. Okay, everyone. So today we're in an amazing event, but I gotta introduce you to an amazing person, Deanna Munoz. And I gotta tell you folks, when it comes to the Chicano community out here in Kansas City, the low-riding community, I don't think any of this would be happening if it wasn't for the hard work that Deanna has been putting in for years. So I'm truly honored to be here today, not only speaking at the event, but just being able to interview Deanna, which again, I admire you a whole ton, everything that you've been doing. So Deanna, tell me, what are we doing here today? What's going on?
Yeah, so we wanted to support entrepreneurs in Kansas City. I know, especially our Latino Chicano entrepreneurs who otherwise sometimes get dismissed or not heard and really need those resources and opportunities, and to be able to be up here and speak about their journeys, because we're all somehow intertwined, and if we don't share those stories, then we can't support and help each other.
What are the plans in Kansas City? What do you got going on? Because I know you always got something going on. What's next?
Yeah, so 2024, we're definitely, like we said, going to be working with the lowrider bike community. We're so excited about that. We just entered our lowrider model car, and why I'm saying that is because those kids are entrepreneurs.
Yes.
They already are, and they're at ages 8 to whatever. And these types of events that are happening give them, like you said, you see people like you who have been successful, or maybe aren't as successful as they feel they should be, but have this journey that they can share with the young people. That they're like, okay, I don't feel like I can do this right now, but maybe I can do it and get support from this person, that person. And knowing that there's so many people in our community that want to help, right? It's not just us at Latino Art Foundation. You yourself, are open to supporting and helping. There's so many here that want to do that. And so that's our thing. 2024 is going to be all about entrepreneurship, all about art, all about low-riding community events, just supporting everyone and anyone so that way they can get that level up and support each other.
I love it. And I got to tell you, with your model cars, I've been watching what you guys are doing, and they're laying down patterns and all that kind of stuff. I wish I would have had that when I was a kid. I think I was using like nail polish with glitter to try to put the flake on the cars when I was a little kid. So love what you're doing. Thank you so much for always being there and representing all of us in this community. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, guys, I hope you really enjoyed the episode today, and I want to remind you that today's episode was brought to you by Televida and Exo Films, and we're super excited for you guys to join us every time that we have an episode so that you guys can learn what's happening in the community. So thank you so much for being with us.